Can you feel it? There's something in the air. Something's different. A sense of inner peace. Things have changed. I've grown, matured. And Pikmin 4 released. It is January, which can mean only one thing. You've already given up on your New Year's resolution. And I have a 2023 to discuss. Two things. January is the most wonderful time of the year. A time where months are discussed and games are bitched about. And it's been that way for my entire life, if you don't count the first 16 years at least. The drill. You know it by now. We have 12 beautiful little months to take a peek at, and hopefully none of them has a Fire Emblem game. I hate January, man. January 2023 was the month of Fire Emblem Engage. Now, as we all know, I only talk about my own personal experiences in these discussions, the games that I played. So let's talk about Fire Emblem Engage. That's right, I played this game. The stars aligned perfectly for this. The motion of the entire universe was halted to allow for this one miracle to bless the human race. I could afford it, it was in stock, I pressed buy. Holy shit! My time with Fire Emblem Engage took place within the last 2 days of the year, so it barely counts as part of this discussion. But can I make up for that by telling you that Fire Emblem Engage changed me? By telling you that this game blew me away? By telling you that I'm a Fire Emblem fan now? No. Yeah, I don't know. I actually had a really good time with Fire Emblem Engage. I didn't play most of it, honestly. But in my few hours with the game, I had a pretty good time. I liked the story and the characters, and the gameplay was pretty engaging. I can definitely see myself spending more time with this game and quite enjoying myself. I didn't really have anything to complain about with it, other than a couple things that are definitely more of a problem with turn-based RPGs than Fire Emblem specifically. So, if this game is an accurate indication of how the rest of the series might sit with me, then colour me intrigued. There might be a world in which I become a Fire Emblem fan after all. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe released on February 24th, and was my first gaming purchase of the year. Being a remaster of my favourite 2D Kirby game, this was always going to be one that held my interest, and upon playing it, this game was very much able to retain my interest. I think this is the perfect 2D Kirby game, honestly. There are lots of subtle changes made to the base experience that help bolster it massively in the modern era. Take, for example, the movement speed, which feels to me like it has been increased by a fairly significant amount, which I felt led to a much more satisfying gameplay flow. It was much easier to string together jumps and traverse the level's architecture, and the freedom that this additional speed grants made it so much more enjoyable to do so. The removal of motion control dependency was also a huge win for this game. The motion controls weren't abhorrent in the original release, and were definitely much more bearable than the likes of Donkey Kong Country Returns, but when there was a big load of stuff to inhale and you had to it hurt me. This game also got a massive graphical upgrade, and is now stunning. It's not like the most technically impressive thing the system has to offer, but the new style this game utilizes is downright pretty. And this is all just improvements to the game that was already there. If you want to talk additions, there's new copy abilities, new sub-games, an entire theme park for said sub-games, a really fun epilogue starring Magalore as the playable character and focus of the story. Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe is one of the best remasters Nintendo has ever made. And it held that title for -2 weeks. On February 8th, Nintendo held their very first Nintendo Direct presentation of the year, and I thought they did a pretty good job with this one. Some highlights for me included a meaty 4-minute trailer for Pikmin 4, giving us our first proper showcase of its gameplay and story, Ghost Trick Phantom Detective getting a remaster, a new trailer for the Advance Wars remakes, finally announcing a renewed release date for the game after they were delayed into oblivion, a new look at Tears of the Kingdom, which finally made me feel confident that this game would be a worthy follow-up to Breath of the Wild, the next wave of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC, and Nintendo finally adding Game Boy and Game Boy Advance to Nintendo Switch Online, the former on the base service, and the latter on the expansion pack. The initial lineups for each system were pretty odd, I'll be the first to admit, but I'm not going to complain about new additions to this service, as ultimately, anything adding value to a subscription I was already going to be paying for is only a good thing. The emulation is really nice here too, even going as far as adding filters to the Game Boy app for each different model of the handheld. But by far, the biggest thing that happened in this Direct was the reveal and immediate subsequent release of Metroid Prime Remastered. This is a re-release that has been rumoured near enough since Metroid Prime 4 was revealed back in 2017. More specifically, I think people were expecting a Prime Trilogy collection in HD, but if you ask me, this was almost the better move. This is the first time in Nintendo history that a major release that wasn't free to play has been shadow dropped. This thing released on the eShop immediately after the Direct ended, and this is just so unprecedented. This sets a standard, not only for the Metroid series, but for re-releases as a whole, that I sincerely hope Nintendo continues to live up to. It created an immense amount of hype for Metroid out of thin air, and because it was available right away, so many people thought they'd better see what all the fuss was about, and ended up buying the game. Now, a physical release did also happen, it just came out in March. But the actual game released in February. But I'm a physical collector, so I didn't get it until March. But everybody else played it in February. So when do I talk about it? With March? Or with February? Or with... It's March, bitch! Go! Metroid Prime Remastered is absolutely everything I could have wanted it to be. Hell, to call it a remaster honestly feels like it's selling it short. This is about as good a remake as you can hope to get out of the games industry nowadays. The controls have been reworked to utilize the dual analog sticks of the Switch, and the execution is divine. It leads to such a buttery smooth gameplay experience that fits into Metroid Prime so naturally that you'd be hard-pressed to convince newcomers that this isn't how the game was always controlled. It's perfection. There genuinely does not exist a better control scheme for a Metroid Prime game. It doesn't get any better than this. The button mappings are also a lot more logical than they were on the GameCube, which allows the controller to meld into my hands while I'm playing. Controlling Samus becomes second nature, and allows me to become fully immersed in this world. Which, to quickly pivot and talk about the graphics... Ooh. This game... It's the best looking thing this system has ever been able to handle. I'm sorry. Each and every individual asset has been completely remade from the ground up, and they're rendered in such exquisite detail. The enemies have all been remodeled and have a fidelity that sparks an interest in their biology within me that I never knew I had. It really made me appreciate the intricacies of their design. The sublime texture work only works to enhance that appreciation tenfold. The lighting system used is, simply put, outrageously good looking. I cannot fathom how this game runs on what is essentially a tablet. And the cherry on top? This game runs at a buttery smooth 60 FPS. This is how you re-release a classic game. This is the gold standard that all re-releases should be aiming for. This was worth waiting a few weeks to get physically. Wave 4 of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe DLC also released this month, with a surprise twist. Birdo. Yeah, the trailer in the Nintendo Direct revealed the inclusion of a brand new character to 8 Deluxe's roster, which absolutely took me by surprise. I mean, logically, Mario Kart 8's DLC included new characters, so it could be argued this was at least somewhat to be expected, but this was also branded as a booster course pack. New levels and nothing more. So this was an exciting addition for sure. The tracks we got this time around were pretty solid. As ever, I wasn't really interested in any of the real-life city tracks from Mario Kart Tour, but the selection of returning tracks was really good, with Waluigi Stadium and DK Summit being my favourites by far. We also got another brand new track, in the form of Yoshi's Island, and this instantly cemented itself as one of the best Mario Kart tracks ever. Such a loving homage to the series it's based on, with so many cool details to spot all over the place, and a solid layout to hold it all together. Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach finally made its way over to the Switch on April 19th, and was a surprisingly competent port of the game. It's by no means a perfect version of this game, but for what it's worth, I'd make the same argument for every version of this game. It's the buggy, thoroughly flawed game you'd expect it to be. But what makes it so impressive is that this game, in some ways, is better on Switch than it is on PS4. The textures are lower resolution, sure, but the game still looked surprisingly comparable to its PS4 counterpart, and the performance seems to be a lot more consistent throughout. Or at least that was the case for the opening hour of the game. The further I got into this version, the worse it started to run. The frame drops were abundant and agonizing. The amount of times the game had to straight up pause for a breather just kept increasing, and it got past the point of bearable. It's still impressive to me that this game works at all on the Switch, and while I can't see this ever being my go-to version of Security Breach, for what it's worth, it's a respectable version of Security Breach. And if you want to know my opinion on the game itself, be patient. Video game movies as a concept were finally validated this month, as the Super Mario Bros. Movie released on the 5th, at least here in the UK. And I know I've already talked about this before, but I adore this film. It was just the perfect Mario movie. It obviously had some flaws, like its pacing and the voices of the Kongs, but everything else about it made for a purely blissful watching experience. And it set a new gold standard for how video game movies should be handled. Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp finally released this month, and after waiting patiently for so many months, suffering through delay after delay after delay, I finally got my hands on this game, and I didn't play it. Whoops. I don't know what happened. I bought this game day one, was really excited to play it, and then just didn't. And I don't have an explanation for that. This game really fell under the radar, which is surprising considering every single Nintendo Direct was announced to a slew of people begging for a release date, me included. I will definitely play these games eventually, I promise. But I think the one time I did try went a little something like, yeah, that checks out. On May 12th, the world was graced with the release of The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. I had a lot of reservations going into this game. I was worried that reusing the same map as Breath of the Wild would limit the game. The trailers weren't giving me much faith that the game would be able to stand on its own 2 feet. I had every reason to believe that this game was just going to be Breath of the Wild again. And I have never been so happy to be so incredibly wrong. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is a masterpiece. I adored absolutely everything about this game. And I was also taken aback by just how completely unique it was from its predecessor. The map is technically the same, but almost every area has fundamental differences that alter the landscape in some significant way. And for me, that made rediscovering each part of Hyrule really exciting. I loved entering a new part of the map and figuring out how it had changed since the last game. It's a small thing, but it was a consistently enjoyable aspect of the game. But of course, the meat and potatoes of Tears of the Kingdom are the gameplay additions, the most notable of which being Link's new abilities. Ooh! The Ultra Hand ability started out feeling a bit too similar to Magnesis, but then within minutes, I was able to see just how much it opens the game as a sandbox. The ability to fuse your weapons and shields adds another layer of depth and complexity to the game's durability system that cannot be understated. The Ascend ability, while pretty situational, offers a really fun way to interact with the world, and is particularly beneficial in the new caves that can be found all over the place now. The Rewind ability is possibly the one that took me the longest to see the benefit of, but once you start utilizing it in combat and puzzle solving, you fall in love with it instantly. These moves offer a synergy to the gameplay that, when used to its fullest potential, is immensely satisfying. The abilities aren't at all without their jank. They can honestly be pretty clunky at times, but their pros far outweigh their cons. And this isn't even to make mention of the story, which, despite what many would have you believe, is incredible, and its structure offers a unique approach to storytelling, with the multiple branches of plot happening simultaneously. The depths was something I never saw coming, and took me completely by surprise, and they ended up being one of my favourite additions to the game, if for no other reason than because they're just more world to explore. I could go on and on and on about why I love Tears of the Kingdom so much, to the extent that I feel obligated to dedicate an entire discussion to it. But for the time being, just know that this game is amazing. My only real complaints are that the menu that pops up when you try to fuse something to an arrow is really clunky and cumbersome to traverse. And, for being a big focus of the marketing and box art, the skies were massively underutilized. But you know what? I can look past that. I sincerely believe that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is one of the single greatest video games ever made. A monumentally important title for the industry, and a mystifyingly well-crafted experience through and through. A Nintendo Direct aired on June 21st, and had a lot of notable announcements. The main highlights for me were the Super Mario RPG remake, Princess Peach Showtime, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Pikmin 1+2, remasters of the first two Pikmin games, and the only ones in the series that matter, that weren't on the Switch. Much like Metroid Prime Remastered, these games were shadow dropped on the eShop right after the Direct. But the physical release wasn't set to release until September, my god! We also had WarioWare Move It, Wave 5 of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC for the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe game, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder, a brand new 2D Mario game that looked to finally break the curse of bland unoriginality that the new Super Mario Bros. Games fell victim to. The only game on offer this month was Everybody 1-2 Switch, and to call this a game and not unrelenting nightmare fuel is generous. This game is just kind of happened. It's basically 1-2 Switch meets Jackbox, and in its execution, it's fine. I don't think it's as unbearably bad as other people seem to, but come on now. Jackbox is on the same system, and is just an objectively better version of this game. The only thing Everybody 1-2 Switch has going for it by comparison is allowing you to have custom profile pictures that Nintendo would never approve of. Other than that, it really is just fine. I truly never thought this day would come. I never thought I'd be able to sit here and say, "Hey, what's up, it's your boy Rawk. I have played Pikmin 4. And yet, here we are. Pikmin 4 is a difficult game to eloquently describe my feelings about. Much like with Zelda, I had my reservations going into this game, which came mostly from the fact that I played the free demo a little while before release, and I didn't really find it all that enjoyable. I don't know why. I was fresh off the heels of one of the most stressful months I would experience in 2023, so maybe that had something to do with it. But I think more than anything, my hype and expectations were so astronomically high that not having them met immediately was worrying to me. But when the full game released on July 21st, I was proven wrong on every conceivable front. I know what you're expecting here. I know you're expecting me to delve deep into exactly why I love this game so much. Every thought, every feeling I had about it. But to do that here, to do that now, would be a disservice to this game. Pikmin 4 is such a monumentally special game to me. It touched me and my life in a way that I could never have anticipated. It provided a magic that I've long thought only came about in childhood. It's quite possibly the best game I've ever played. So, I need time. I need to give this game my all, discuss it on its own, and give my entire being to it. Because it means too much to me to not do that. I implore you, if you have not yet played Pikmin 4, you are missing out on one of the most truly wonderful gaming experiences of modern times. I beg that you do yourself the favour of letting this game into your life. Pikmin 4 is everything I ever could have wanted it to be. And it's so much more. It's so much more. Anyway, the penultimate wave of Mario Kart DLC also released this month, and as ever, it was pretty great. The characters they added this time around were a treat. Petey Piranha finally making a return after Double Dash, Wiggler, my favourite member of the Mario Kart 7 roster, and Kamek finally making his way into a mainline game after being scrapped from Mario Kart 64. These guys were a joy to play as, and the tracks on offer here were really solid too, with the best of the bunch unquestionably being Koopa Cape. I will hear nothing to the contrary. It's still so wild to me that we're getting legitimate new content for Mario Kart 8 of all games. I couldn't be happier to keep returning to this game for something new and fresh after so many years. No major game releases this month, nothing that caught my attention at least, so I'll have to make do with some devastating news instead. When Super Mario Bros. Wonder was initially revealed back in June, many people speculated that Mario's voice was not quite what it used to be. I personally didn't really hear much of a difference in Mario's voice. I honestly just put it down to the fact that the game was actually using new recordings, a thing that a lot of Mario spin-off games on the Switch did not do. Luigi! Which I'm very thankful for. But I was also arguing that Mario Wonder looked to be a much more wacky game, so Mario's voice being a bit more wacky was a creative decision. Me being wrong was also a creative decision. After first starring as our favourite plumber all the way back in the mid-90s, Charles Martinet was officially stepping down from the role. This was really hard news to swallow for me. Charles Martinet is Mario, in my eyes. There's a reason nobody wanted Chris Pratt to be voicing him in the Mario movie. Mario's voice and Charles Martinet are inseparable in most of our minds, so to have officially witnessed his last ever performance of the character was hard-hitting news, to say the least. Mario was obviously in good hands with Kevin Afghani, who was later confirmed to be voicing Mario in Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I mean, I was convinced that he was Charles Martinet until this announcement hit, so I'm by no means worried about the character's future. I'm just gonna miss Charles Martinet. He's done such an incredible thing by bringing life to a character that has brought so many people all over the world so much joy. Thank you, Charles Martinet, for everything you've brought to us fans of the Mushroom Kingdom, and I wish you the best of luck in whatever adventures you embark on next. The final Nintendo Direct of the year was this month, with highlights including a remake of Mario vs. Donkey Kong, another Code Recollection, a collection of remakes of the Wii and DS and other Code games, new looks at Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, Super Mario RPG, and Princess Peach Showtime, F-Zero 99, a brand new NSO exclusive game to replace the soon-to-be-deceased Pac-Man 99, some upcoming Amiibo figures, the final wave of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC, and finally, they are remaking Paper Mario: The 1,000-Year Door. I don't have the words to describe how this makes me feel. No word of a lie, as soon as that music kicked in, I burst into fucking tears. We have suffered as fans of this series for so long, and to finally get anything related to the original trilogy of Paper Mario games is all I could have ever wanted. The 1,000-Year Door remake looks drop-dead gorgeous. A perfect reimagining of that game's world and style, and everything that made the game so unique was retained. It wasn't watered down to fit in with new Paper Mario, which honestly merits a discussion of its own. But the most important thing this trailer confirmed was that the battle system is back. Oh my sweet beautiful boy, how I've missed you. Gone with the rings, gone with the paint, gone with the fucking stickers. We're back to straight up, no nonsense, turn-based combat. And you know what? It's about damn time. Paper Mario: The 1,000-Year Door cannot get into my hands quickly enough. I can't wait to play this thing. I need to do something about this. Oh, there it is. Pikmin 1+2 finally saw a physical release this month. You know, I could have played them all the way back in June, but as a physical games collector, I elected instead to wait nearly 3 months to play them. I'm sure it was worth waiting for though, right? Yeah. This box art is so boring! It is so nice to have these games on the Switch, especially with Pikmin 4 releasing back in July. I don't know if people generally consider these to be the definitive versions of these two games, but I think they'll likely be the only versions I play from here on out. Getting the widescreen and motion controls of the Wii versions on a more traditional controller like the GameCube versions makes this the perfect way to play these games for me. And yes, compared to the likes of Metroid Prime Remastered, these games fall pretty flat when it comes to enhancements. But for a series like Pikmin, I think it was much more important to just get these games in people's hands. And judging by the response to these games on social media, they succeeded in that. I'm so happy to have the whole Pikmin series on one console, and available portably. Thanks to this release, the Nintendo Switch really is the Pikmin machine, and I love that. You mean to tell me Nintendo were capable of making the best 2D Mario ever conceived all along, and they still chose to release New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe? Yeah, there's no point in beating around the bush here. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the best 2D Mario game, in my opinion. Bare minimum, it's the best since Super Mario World. But I have many an argument for why this game is better. Man, it's gonna be so hard to be brief about this. Super Mario Bros. Wonder offers the most creamy, smooth gameplay experience of any game in the series. It takes what worked with the classic formula, adds a dash of new Super Mario Bros. For good measure, and tightens everything up to perfection. The controls are so snappy, and your character's movements feel so precise and fucking delicious, to be perfectly honest. The levels are designed so masterfully to take full advantage of the moveset on offer, especially when you consider one of the game's greatest additions, the badge system. The badges can be obtained throughout the game, and shake up your character's moveset in one way or another, and finding and experimenting with these things to see what they brought to the table was such a blast. I did end up finding a favourite and pretty much using that for the entire game, so it's by no means a flawless system, but it offers a wealth of new gameplay opportunities and variety. Speaking of which, look at the crazy shit this game has on offer. This is the most spectacular array of environments we've ever gotten from a Mario game. Even when compared to Odyssey, this game just has such an array of creative locations, and its inhabitants are similarly stupendous in their design and originality. This game is such a breath of fresh air from the new Super Mario Bros. Games. I don't mean to keep ragging on them, because I do genuinely love them, but they really did feel like the bare minimum creatively, and this game proves that to me. And when you allow yourself to let loose and be experimental creatively, that's how you get the best results possible. Creative limitations, whether they be by design or a byproduct of a lack of ambition, only work to hold a product back. And Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a shining example of how creativity is the glue that holds all of a game's other elements together. A lesson that the Paper Mario team finally seemed to be learning! This was by far Nintendo's biggest month of the year in terms of game releases. There wasn't one game, but there was two. WarioWare Move It released on November 3rd, a sequel to the Wii's WarioWare game, Smooth Moves. That's generally considered to be the best game in this series, so to see it get a sequel on Switch was really cool. As for the game itself, it's a pretty good time. The motion controls can be a tad hit or miss in my experience, but they worked well enough for the most part. The different poses that each microgame utilizes felt like they might limit the potential wagginess of each one, but I learned very quickly that that wasn't the case. These things are still completely off the walls, and having to utilize different poses to achieve certain goals actually ended up being really fun. This game was a really nice change of pace from Get It Together, because as much as I enjoyed that game, controlling a character who was on screen at all times made it feel pretty separate from a more traditional WarioWare experience. So it's nice to have Move It on the same console to give us a balance of the two styles. The final main Nintendo published game of the year, Super Mario RPG, released this month. This was a remake of the beloved SNES classic that had never released in the UK before, so I was very excited to play it. I've only spent a couple of hours with it so far, but I cannot wait to play it more because this is an exceptionally good game. It's gorgeous, and the soundtrack is spectacular, but the gameplay and humour is where this game really shines to me. The game still utilises a grid-based movement system for cutscenes, and has the characters jump between poses with no in-between frames, which in games like Link's Awakening on Switch or Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is incredibly jarring and distracting. But here in Mario RPG, it's used to the game's benefit to heighten the comedy of any given situation. The gameplay on offer here is genuinely a contender for best Mario RPG gameplay in my opinion, easily standing toe-to-toe with Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door in my eyes. The action commands are so visceral and satisfying to pull off, The flow of combat is really engaging, and the strategic elements of play only help to bolster the whole experience. This was the first time I'd ever actively searched out battles in an RPG, purely because of how enjoyable I found them to be. And I think that right there speaks volumes to this game's quality. For so long, I've always thought that I didn't like RPGs, but after falling in love with Paper Mario, then adoring Persona 5, then really liking Xenoblade, then having a damn good time with Fire Emblem Engage, and then falling head over heels for Super Mario RPG, it's clearer to me than it ever has been. I do like RPGs. I just hate Pokemon. November was the month that we finally bid farewell to the era of Mario Kart 8, as the final wave of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass DLC for the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe game, Wave 6, released on the 9th. This was such an incredible way to bid this game farewell. The tracks in this wave were downright sublime, with Daisy Circuit, DK Mountain, and of course, Wii Rainbow Road being the biggest highlights. I was also immensely happy with the additions to the roster this time around, more specifically, Diddy Kong and Funky Kong, both making their grand return from Mario Kart Wii. Pauline was also a really exciting addition. I mean, I'll take any Mario Odyssey representation really, but I think I mostly liked her inclusion because it finally made it feel like the Donkey Kong franchise had received satisfactory representation in this game. And then Peachette was also there. This was an outstanding farewell for Mario Kart 8. A true celebration of this series done in the best way possible. The Booster Course Pass had its issues, but it was one of the most consistently exciting things to keep up with in both 2022 and 2023, and I couldn't be happier about that. This month had no major game releases, but as ever, it did have the Game Awards. Super Mario Bros. Wonder and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom both received Game of the Year nominations, but both unfortunately lost to Baldur's Gate 3. Nintendo didn't go home empty-handed though, as Pikmin 4 won Best Sim/Strategy Game, Super Mario Bros. Wonder won Best Family Game, and The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom won Best Action-Adventure Game. And instead of being allowed time to dedicate the award to the many hard-working members of his team, as well as the late Satoru Iwata, Eiji Aonuma was instead asked to wrap it up so there'd be more time to shove ads in our faces. This was not a good look for the Game Awards.
And that was Nintendo in 2023. And I don't know if this is like a hot take or anything, but I think this was by far one of the Switch's best years in terms of output. And I know, you've been waiting for it. Which game was Rawk's favourite this year?
Well, let's find out, shall we? I think it's pretty obvious given how much time I spent discussing them, but my main contenders for this year are Super Mario Bros. Wonder, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and Pikmin 4. One is far and away my favourite 2D Mario game, one is probably my favourite Zelda game, and the other gives Super Mario Odyssey a run for its money and is a genuine contender for my favourite game ever. Yeah. So, my favourite game this year was Pikmin 4. But honestly, it was incredibly close. Any one of these three games could have easily taken the top spot. But there was just something about Pikmin 4, man.
But just because Funny Plant Game was my favourite thing on offer this year, didn't mean that the rest of Nintendo's lineup was lagging. Yes, there's an argument to be made that Nintendo lent a little bit too hard on older games this year, what with the many re-releases and major DLCs, but at least for me, those were just as, if not more exciting than some of the major new games. To me, this year felt like one last hurrah for the Nintendo Switch as Nintendo's primary console on the market. Its final chance to show us just how amazing it can be before the next generation of Nintendo is ushered in. All we know about 2024 is re-releases, with the exception of Princess Peach Showtime. And while, yes, Nintendo can obviously reveal original games whenever they want in the year, that seems significant to me. And if this truly was to be the Switch's last year as Nintendo's primary system, then I think I'm happy to end these discussions of Nintendo's past year here. I don't know where I'll be in my life if and when Nintendo's next system releases. I don't know if I'll have anything valuable to add to that conversation. So I think I'm happy for these chats to end when the Switch's reign does. But if I'm wrong and the Nintendo Switch still has another year or so left in it, then I'll be back next January to gush about Paper Mario.